Turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 12. We are talking about this issue of words today. We're going to look at what Jesus says about words. And this principle that Jesus introduces here, they actually introduced in the Sermon on the Mount a few chapters before, the inside-out principle. The inside-out principle. How many of you have ever texted the wrong person before? Yeah. Isn't that just the most frightening thing in the world? I was sitting in my office a few years ago just minding my own business, and all of a sudden I receive a text. And the text said, "I love you, honey, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight." And it was from a male member of our church. And I said, "I love you too, but what about your wife?" And he texted back, "Pastor Mike!" exclamation point. It was last week, a couple of weeks ago maybe, where I was finishing up work at the college, teaching my class. It was about 9:30. I was about to head home, and I was thinking of my daughter, and so I thought, well, I better text her now before she goes to bed. And so I texted her. I said, "How you doing, sweet girl?" And somebody texted back, "Is this for Tammy or for Kaylee?" It was one of our female staff members here at the church. So I'm saying this publicly because I do not want to get in any trouble. I said, "It's for Kaylee!" exclamation point. Man, we have to be careful with the words that we say, right? In fact, a lot of our lives are very careful about what we say and to whom we say those things. Life in general is kind of all about behavior modification, isn't it? It's about what we say and do before other people and monitoring those things that we say and do and then modifying them just to make sure that we don't get ourselves in trouble. That is true about life in general. In fact, our culture is kind of focused around that emphasis. We punish bad things, all kinds of ways that bad behaviors are punished in our culture, and so we learn to avoid saying bad things, even if we don't really feel it in our hearts not to say them, but we learn not to do it. We also, in our culture, reward good things and good behavior. For example, I'm a pastor of a church, right? And so I have to do good things. I don't want to do them, but I have to do good things. I get paid to do good things. You guys, on the other hand, as I like to say, you guys are good for nothing. You're good for free. I'm hoping you'll catch that. That's the way life revolves. I mean, it's all about punishing bad behavior, and it's about rewarding good behavior. But here's the issue, and this is going to come up in this passage today. In a part of that effort that we make to modify the things that we say, the things that we do, here's what happens. If we're honest, if we think deeply, that external modification focus can really become a game of pretend, can it? Because here's what happens. When we're all alone, the real you comes out. Or when you face pressure or crisis or threat, the real you, the real me, comes out. And so despite our best efforts and our energy and our effort, we try and try and try, the real you overwhelms and overcomes the fake you, the behavior modification you, and kind of wins the day. So here's the question. This is the question that Jesus asked. Who is the real you? Who is the real you? That's his focus. That's the kingdom of God's focus. Who we are in our heart. Because Jesus would say, there in your heart is what matters the most. And so there goes Jesus poking around in our hearts, trying to help us understand who we are so that our lives can change. And he would say that the quality of our lives is really based upon this thing, not external modification. It's really based upon this thing called the heart. So today, we're going to look at this passage where Jesus connects the words that we say to our hearts. Look in Matthew 12, verse 33. Here's the inside-out principle. Jesus says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers. Now remember, last week we talked about Jesus' encounter with the religious leaders. They had basically said to him, the works that you do are of the devil. And Jesus, in response, is giving them this clarity about the inside-out principle. He's saying, you brood of vipers. A viper is a poisonous snake. How can you speak good when you're evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. There it is. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. The evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Wow. And I know what you're doing in your mind, because I did it too. When I first read this and studied this, I began to challenge the assumptions that Jesus is making here about this inside-out principle. But as we think about our words, we think about behavior modification. Here's some mistakes that we make with our words. First of all, we say to ourselves, well, words kind of exist on their own, as if they are just floating out there in the universe, independent of a source of some kind. It'd be like fruit without a tree, right? And Jesus would say, no, the fruit, in essence, the fruit means the existence of a tree. He talks about the tree-fruit relationship. When you see fruit, you know there's a tree. If you come upon an apple on the ground, you know that something preceded that apple, that there was something, some phenomenon of some kind that created it. That's what fruit is. And so Jesus is inherently saying, no, words are connected to a deeper reality. They just don't show up on their own. They are planted in something much deeper. And here's the other mistake we make. We say to ourselves, well, words don't really reflect my heart. Not really. I mean, I may say something bad, but that doesn't mean I'm bad. We say things like, well, I didn't mean it. Or we say things like, my mouth just kind of speaks on its own, right? It just kind of does it on its own. After all, you can't judge a tree by its fruit. That's essentially what we're saying. Because Jesus is saying that fruit are our words. That the tree is our character, is our heart. So Jesus would say, no, the kind of tree that exists is defined by the kind of fruit. There is a match, there is a connection. The quality and the character of the tree is defined by the quality and the character of the fruit. They are directly related. So Jesus is saying, listen, words reveal something. Words reveal the quality of the heart. He is saying the mouth speaks the heart, reflects the heart, expresses the heart. That's the inside-out relationship. And so Jesus here is connecting the things that these men had said about him to their evil hearts. It's the connection of the inside to the outside to the inside. That's what's going on. And in a world where behavior and performance and externals matter the most, Jesus is saying, who is the real you? And you can come to understand that by the things that you speak in your life. So look in verses 35 through 37, in this connection of the inside out. Jesus is going to say this powerful thing. He says the good person out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good. The bad person out of the bad treasure brings forth evil. And in order to buy that, we need to skip down to verse 36. Jesus says, verse 36, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. Wow, really? Jesus is saying there's accountability here. Jesus is saying that God takes our words seriously, that they reveal our heart, they have power, they mean things. Why? Well, that's found in verse 37. Why are words so important to God? He says in verse 37, because by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Here's what he's saying. And I just want you to accept this at face value. Okay, you can push back later as we explain things. Accept this at face value. Here's what I think Jesus is saying. You are your words. You are your words. I am my words. He says it clearly in verse 35. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. Bad person, evil. And you say, just as I did, I don't buy that. Because sometimes I mess up. Sometimes I make mistakes. Sometimes I say things that I wish I wouldn't have said. But here's what I think Jesus is emphasizing here. And it relates to an old principle of math that we learned in the 6th grade. I don't remember when. How many of you remember the principle of the common divisor or the common denominator? No? Okay, some of you, yeah. I didn't remember it either, so I had to look it up. So this is the principle in math that says you take a set of numbers and you seek to find the largest number by which those numbers can be divided. So you take numbers like 6, 12, and 36. What is the largest common divisor of those three numbers? 6. Very good. Here's what I think Jesus is saying. It's the same principle. He's saying you look across the spheres of your life, not momentary mistakes, not impromptu errors. Look across the spheres of your life. First, look at your relationships. Look at your wife and your interaction with her, your husband, your interaction with him, your boss, your kids, your parents, the things that you say to them. Look across the settings of your life, your work, your home, stressful situations, when you experience loss, pressure, even recreation, vacation. Look across those. What are the words that cut across those spheres of your life, and what are the patterns of those words? That's the common divisor. That's the common denominator. That sum total will help you to understand who you are in heart because of analyzing what you say in your words. And a lot of times, folks, what happens is that we have these things we say, and we rationalize. We say, well, that's not me, that's them. Or that's the situation. Here's the problem with that. You change the person, you change the situation, you end up saying the same things in that new situation and to that same person. You take yourself with you. And so the problem is out there. No, Jesus is saying maybe the problem is in here. Because every time you change the out there, the same thing happens. You're repeating yourself. There are patterns in your life. The things that you speak indicate something deeper, and it's not about other people and other circumstances. As Yogi Berra would say, he says, wherever you go, there you are. Isn't that great? It's true. You take yourself with you. And so Jesus is saying again, who is your real self? In this passage, Jesus is exposing this idea that, the words are really separate from us. The words don't really indicate the disposition of our heart. He's saying, no, maybe there is a heart problem. And maybe today you'd be honest enough to say, it's not a word problem. If I'm honest, if I look at my life and I look across my life, I see myself saying things in these different situations and circumstances and to different people, and there is a pattern. And so it's not a word problem. Maybe it really is a heart problem. And Jesus would say to you today, thank you for your honesty. Because I'm in the heart transformation business. And Jesus would say, don't give me your behavior. Give me your heart. If you give me your heart, your mouth will follow. That's the inside-out relationship. Jesus changes the heart. And so you say, okay, but how? Here's what I think he would recommend to you and me today. 4 things. First of all, he would say this, remember the power of words. Boy, we forget how powerful words are, don't we? That's why we're so quick to just kind of spew them. Remember the power of words. That words can hurt or they can heal. That words create reality, not just reflect reality, they self-fulfill. The Apostle James said in James 3 that words, our tongue, is like a bit on a horse or like a rudder on a ship. They have the ability to steer our whole life and to direct our lives and the quality of our lives. Remember the power of words. Next, Jesus would say, analyze the quality of the fruit. Man, this is so important. Because we don't do that. We just talk and speak. We don't analyze what we're saying. Jesus would say, look at that fruit for a moment. Analyze it, ponder it, and then speak the truth to yourself about yourself. Confess what is real. That's when I can begin to do my work in you. Be self-aware. Ask yourself, what are the kinds of words that I tend to say? No matter the circumstance, no matter the situation. We used to have a lemon tree in our backyard. And remember years ago the bad freeze came. And that lemon tree, it used to produce these really big lemons. I mean, not like the cute little mini lemons that you see in the grocery store, like softball-sized lemons. And we had a ton of them. But the freeze happened, and we noticed a few months after the freeze occurred that the lemons began not looking so good. We cut them open, and they'd be kind of yucky on the inside. You could just see they just weren't healthy. The fruit was bad because the tree was turning bad. That's the relationship. And so Christ would say to you and me, listen, you're not even aware of the fruit. You're not even thinking about the things that you're saying. You're not analyzing yourself in such a way that you can clarify the kind of fruit that you're bearing in your life, which goes to the kind of heart that you have and that you possess. So analyze the quality of the fruit. The next, determine their source. Remember, with every fruit, there's a tree. Fruit does not exist on its own. It comes from a deeper reality, a prerequisite of some kind. And so once we analyze the quality of the fruit, we rewind the tape and we go, why did I just say that? Where did that come from? Because it didn't just exist on its own. It came from some attitude in my heart. Where did that come from? Why was that there? Why did I say that? Why do I respond to that stimulus that way? Why that person? Why does that person always get me? Is it really about them? Or is it about me? Why that situation? Why are there words of anger? Does it mean that there's some resentment that I might have in my life? Something that was stolen from me that I'm bitter and angry about? And by the way, is it directed at that person? Isn't it true that our words, most of the time the victims of our words are innocent bystanders? They have very little to do with the issue. So you have a bad day at the office, a really bad day. You mess up something, you get reamed out by your boss. And you come home. And you yell at the wife, and you yell at the kids, and you kick the dog, and you don't feel better at the end of that. And they're just innocent. Why was that directed at them? What is the source of what's going on in my life? Why the fearful words? What is it that I'm fearing in life? Is it my expectation that I must have control? Why the controlling words? Why words that placate and please other people? What's going on there? Why do I need that person's approval? Why are they so important to me? Words that undermine other people, words that sabotage other people. Why is their success so threatening to me? And folks, this is the mature spiritual response. This is what truly confession is. The word confess in the New Testament literally means to say the same thing as. And so when I say the same thing about my life that God would say about my life, then I've truly confessed. What's going on? Why those words? Why did I say that? And then here's the final thing. Ask God to transform your heart. It begins in prayer, but it doesn't end there. See, asking God to transform your heart is just really the beginning. Again, not giving Jesus your behavior, but giving Him your heart. All that you are, every part. Why? Because as He says here, the parts are connected to the whole. And I have a sense that there are some things unsurrendered. You know, when you have problems with our tongues, persistent, consistent problems with our tongues, normally it's an indication of some unwillingness. It's an indication of an unsurrendered life, that there's a part of our lives that we're holding back from God. The whole of our lives impacts the parts. He says, give me your heart, give me it all. And then over time, in the process of self-awareness, in the process of confession, in the process of walking with Jesus, in the process of building relationships that encourage us, we find power to change. And here's the irony of that. Our focus is not primarily on our words and our behavior and the things that we do and the things that we say. Our focus is upon our love relationship with a living and loving God. And in the power of that relationship, when the heart changes, when the inside changes, there's a natural, organic overflow into our lives. And we say, you know what? I'm not saying the same things I was 5 years ago. God has made me into a different person. It's not been the result of my willpower, my self-effort. God has developed something in me that is of peace and joy. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it means that there's a new reality at work in my life. We were living in Orlando when we first got married. Tammy and I first got married and moved to Orlando, Florida, and it was such a great place to start our marriage. And she thought she had hit the jackpot, man. She learned not long after that that was not true. But we moved to Orlando, and my administrative assistant's husband worked at Disney, and they would just let us go to Disney whenever we wanted. We'd go out there and have dinner and the fireworks, and we'd sit on the beach and just had a great time. What a great way to start a marriage. Well, we moved next door to some people who we got to know and came to discover that they were living together, right? And were not married. Of course, we as Christians, we've been taught that those kinds of things were not God's will. They were not God's best intent. And so we had this little crisis. These are great people that we want to get to know. And so we got to know Mike and Vanita, and we just put aside that whole other thing, sex before marriage, cohabitation, that kind of stuff. It was wrong. It's not the Lord's will. He has a marriage covenant in mind for people. And that's to be experienced in the joy and the abundance of that marriage covenant. But we began to build a relationship with them, and eventually we led them to Christ. And it was soon after that we saw something very natural occur in their lives. As God began to work, God began to very naturally and organically straighten out so many things that in their lives that they felt were wrong. And it became the work of God. It wasn't the work of rules and regulations and stipulations. It was the result of a living God that gave birth to them spiritually, and their lives began to change and align with the God who loved them. And that's what happens. He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. And when we live and walk in that love, we grow. God begins to change us from the inside out. You see, we're kind of good at outside change. We can prop it up. We can work really hard. We're good at it. But Jesus, you know what He's good at? He's good at inside, outside change. He changes the heart. So, here's what I've come to realize. So these things of words, they're powerful, right? And as Jesus said in this passage, they reflect the heart. That's very true. They do. They express the heart. They reflect the heart. But here's what's also true. Here's what I think he's saying also, is that our words actually define the heart as well. That's the relationship back and forth. They determine the heart. They allow the heart to grow and to develop, or they squash it and limit it and cause it to shrink. They change the heart. They make us into something. And so here's what I want to ask you to do today, really to be honest with yourself and say to yourself, is the quality of my life as determined by the things that I say, is this really what I want? Do I really want to have a critical spirit? Do I really want to be judgmental? Do I really want to be a gossip? Do I really want to be fearful? Do I really want to be a worrier? And if you don't, and you admit that, Jesus is saying, I've got good news for you. I can change you, is what he would say. You go, am I helping the people in my life or am I hurting them? And today you might say, you know what? In truth, I'm hurting me and I'm hurting others. God can change you. So let's do this. Let's bow in prayer. And with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, let me just give you a moment to consider that common divisor. What are the words I tend to say? Are they critical, fearful, prideful? Are they rebellious? Consider the source. What's going on there? And then, with just as much honesty as you can, to engage God and His Holy Spirit, to ask Jesus to come and transform your heart. I just have a sense that for some of you this morning, this is striking a chord within, unlike anything else. And you may be saying, man, my speech, my words are poisonous. They're hurting other people. And they're making me a miserable person. The reminder today is not to recommit yourself through self-energy and self-effort, through willpower, to modify your behavior better. Jesus would say to you that that plan does not accomplish ultimately what God wants to accomplish. It's about changing your heart. So, Father in heaven, for those in this room, God, that you're speaking to, for those in this room that feel the weight of conviction, I pray that you would reveal your love, your grace today. I pray that there would not be condemnation, God, that leads to defeat, but instead a sense of empowerment through the Holy Spirit, that you can begin a work in them that will naturally change what they do, what they say, how they live. But it starts in surrender to you. So, Lord, if there are people in this room that do not know you as Savior, have never come to trust Christ as their forgiver, I pray that they would do that. And I pray for those that do know you, Father, that we would allow greater access, greater parts of our lives, asking ourselves, what are we holding back? What are we unwilling to let go of? Understanding the inside out, that the whole affects the parts affect the whole. that we would completely, fully, and freely surrender ourselves to your amazing work. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being the God who changes us and does so deep from within. We praise you for who you are. In Jesus' name.